If you think making money for love means building a future together, this is what happens when trust quietly turns into control. And you don't realize it until it's already gone. It wasn't always rosy, but we got along. That's how I still remember it when I try to be fair. We met in our mid-20s, both tired in that specific way people are when life hasn't fallen apart yet, but it also hasn't turned into what you hoped. We lived in a small apartment outside Phoenix, nothing fancy, beige carpet that always felt a little dusty, a kitchen window that looked out over the parking lot. In the mornings, sunlight would hit the wall just right and make the place feel warmer than it really was. He was attentive in the beginning, not dramatic, just steady. The kind of man who listened more than he talked. I liked that. I liked feeling chosen without being chased. We talked about the future in practical terms. Bills, savings, maybe a house one day. It wasn't a dream painted in bright colors, but it felt real, solid. I trusted that. When money became tight, it didn't crash down all at once. It crept in quietly, a medical bill we didn't expect, my hours getting cut, his car breaking down twice in 1 year. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed one night, my back against the wall, counting numbers on my phone until my eyes burned. He sat next to me, calm, rubbing my shoulder, telling me we'd figure it out together. His voice was steady. Mine wasn't. The idea didn't come from desperation. That's important to say. It came dressed as logic, as teamwork. He brought it up carefully, like he didn't want to scare me. He said there were women making real money online, that it didn't have to show my face, that it could be temporary, just a boost, just until we were stable again. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above us, listening to the hum. My chest felt tight. Not panic exactly, more like resistance. But then he said the word future again, ours, and somehow that softened everything. We set rules, clear ones, no face, no personal details, no talking outside the platform. He said he'd handle the technical side because he was better with that stuff. Accounts, payments, messages. It felt safer that way, like a buffer between me and whatever this was. The first time I uploaded content, my hands were shaking so badly I had to put the phone down twice. The room was quiet. Afternoon light came through the blinds in thin stripes. I remember the texture of the sheets under my fingers, how my mouth felt dry even though I kept swallowing. I told myself this wasn't about me, it was about us. He showed me the dashboard once, numbers moving, notifications popping up. He smiled, proud, like we'd built something together. I wanted to believe that smile meant partnership, that I was being protected, not managed. At first, the money talk stayed vague. He'd say things like, "It's picking up," or "This month was slower." I didn't question it. Trust felt easier than doubt, especially when doubt came with that familiar ache in my stomach. I worked more, pushed myself further, told myself this was temporary. I started sleeping badly, waking up with my jaw clenched, my shoulders always tight. Sometimes I'd sit in the shower longer than necessary, just letting the water hit my back, trying to feel like my body was still mine. He started changing subtly. New clothes, a new phone, more time out. When I asked casual questions, his answers were smooth, too smooth. I noticed how often he checked his screen, how he angled it away from me without realizing he was doing it. Still, I didn't confront him. I was afraid of what the answers might mean, afraid that asking would break something we couldn't fix. It felt easier to keep believing we were building towards something, even if I couldn't see it clearly anymore. Looking back, there were moments I ignored on purpose, like the night I asked if we could look at the account together again, and he laughed it off, saying I was stressing myself for no reason. I remember standing in the kitchen afterward, fingers gripping the counter edge, staring at a small crack in the tile like it had something to tell me. Our apartment started feeling smaller, the air heavier. Evenings were quieter, not peaceful, just empty. We'd sit on opposite ends of the couch, the TV on but muted, light flickering across the walls. I could feel the distance growing, even when his leg touched mine. Sometimes I'd open my banking app just to reassure myself we were moving forward, but my balance never reflected the effort I was putting in. When I mentioned it, he'd sigh, pull me close, say platforms take time, say patience was part of love. I wanted to be patient. I wanted to believe that sacrifice meant something. So I swallowed my questions and kept going, telling myself this discomfort was the price of stability. Physically, I felt myself shrinking, eating less without meaning to, moving slower. My reflection looked unfamiliar, like someone rehearsing a role instead of living a life. When he touched me, I sometimes flinched before I could stop myself, then felt guilty for it. The nights were the worst. Lying awake, listening to his breathing beside me, counting seconds between each rise of his chest, wondering when trust had started to feel like something I had to earn. I told myself every relationship has phases. That doubt was normal. That love meant endurance. I held on to that idea because letting it go felt like stepping into nothing. And that's where this part really ends. Not with an argument, not with a revelation, just with a quiet, growing sense that I was giving more than I was allowed to see. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was more like the air slowly changing pressure until you don't realize you're struggling to breathe. I started waking up tired, even after a full night of sleep. My body felt heavy in the mornings, like gravity had increased just inside our apartment. I'd sit on the edge of the bed, feet flat on the carpet, staring at the wall until the moment to stand up finally arrived. I worked more, but I felt less present. I went through the motions, camera, lights, angles, smiling when I didn't feel it. When I finished, I'd sit still for a long time, phone resting on my thigh, staring at the screen without opening anything. Sometimes my hands would tremble slightly, not enough to drop the phone, just enough to notice. He said I was doing great, that the account was growing, that consistency mattered. Whenever I asked about numbers, his answers stayed abstract. He talked in trends, not totals. Growth, not money. If I pushed, even gently, his tone shifted. Not angry, disappointed. Like I was missing something obvious. I started apologizing for asking questions. That's when I knew something was wrong, even if I couldn't name it yet. The physical signs came before the thoughts. Tightness in my chest when his phone buzzed late at night. A dull ache behind my eyes when I saw him dressing nicer to run errands. My jaw hurt from clenching it without realizing. I chewed the inside of my cheek raw more than once. He began guarding his phone like it was an extension of his body. Always face down, always locked. If I walked into a room unexpectedly, he'd tilt the screen away, then look up too fast, smiling like nothing had happened. I told myself I was imagining things. That suspicion was poison. That trust was a choice. Still, I noticed how the money never lined up. I'd calculate roughly what should have been there based on activity, tips, messages. Then I'd open my bank app and feel that familiar drop in my stomach when the numbers didn't match. When I brought it up, he'd sigh heavily, run a hand through his hair and say, I didn't understand how platforms worked. He said he was protecting me from stress, That word stuck with me. Protecting. It sounded noble, but it also meant I wasn't allowed to know. I felt smaller every week, like my world was shrinking around the shape he needed it to be. I stopped meeting friends. I didn't want questions I couldn't answer. I avoided mirrors when I could. When I did catch my reflection, I looked tired in a way makeup couldn't fix. My eyes always seemed slightly unfocused, like I was somewhere else. One afternoon while he was out, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, hands wrapped around a cold mug of coffee I hadn't touched. Sunlight came through the window, lighting up dust in the air. I logged into the email account connected to the platform. I hadn't done it before. He said there was no need. My fingers felt stiff as I typed. What I found wasn't dramatic at first, just small inconsistencies, notification emails referencing payouts I didn't recognize, dates that didn't align with what he'd told me. My heart started beating faster, not panic yet, but alert, like my body was waking up before my mind caught on. I followed the trail slowly, clicking, reading, pausing, breathing through my nose because my mouth felt too dry. Then I saw it, a linked account, a separate payment destination. My hands went numb. I remember standing up too fast, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I had to grab the edge of the table to steady myself. My legs felt weak, like they might give out. I stood there, staring at the screen, rereading the same lines until they blurred. He hadn't just controlled the money, he had redirected it. When he came home that night, I was sitting on the couch with my phone in my hand. The room was dim, just the TV light flickering across the walls. I didn't turn it off when he walked in. I didn't look at him right away. I asked him to explain. He laughed at first, a short, surprised sound, like I'd made a joke. Then he saw my face. The laughter stopped. His posture changed, defensive, closed. He said it wasn't what I thought, that it was complicated, that I was overreacting. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hands were shaking now openly. I pressed them together, fingers interlaced, trying to stop it. He kept talking, explaining, rationalizing. Each word landed heavier than the last. Then I saw a transaction, a hotel charge, a gift, a pattern. It wasn't random. I felt something inside me crack quietly. Not a dramatic break, more like a clean split. I stood up slowly, my knees aching, my whole body buzzing. I asked him who she was. He didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything. He said my work made him feel entitled, that he deserved something too, that it wasn't emotional, just physical, just money. He said if I hadn't chosen this path, none of it would have happened. I felt sick. A cold wave moved through me, from my chest down to my stomach. I had to sit back down because standing felt impossible. The room felt unreal, like I was watching it from a distance. The couch fabric under my palms felt rough, grounding me in a way I didn't want. I realized then how carefully the trap had been built, how love had been used as leverage, how silence had been rewarded, how my trust had turned into permission. That night I didn't sleep. I lay on my side, facing away from him, eyes open, staring into the dark. Every sound felt loud, every breath too close. I counted minutes until morning, knowing something irreversible had already happened. Morning came quietly, no dramatic light through the window. Just a dull gray sky and the sound of a car starting somewhere outside. I lay there for a while, staring at the wall, my body stiff, like I'd been holding myself in place all night. When I finally sat up, my head felt heavy and my mouth dry, like I'd forgotten how to sleep properly. He was already awake, moving around the apartment like nothing had changed. Cabinets opening, water running. The normal sounds felt wrong, like they belonged to another life. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom, barefoot on the cold floor, watching him from behind. My hands were shaking again. I pressed them against my thighs, hoping he wouldn't notice. We talked, but not in the way people imagine when they think of confrontation. There was no shouting, no crying fits, just long pauses and sentences that never quite landed. He repeated himself a lot, said it wasn't serious, said I was making it bigger than it was, said we could move past it if I stopped digging. When I told him I wanted access to everything, all the accounts, all the numbers, his face hardened in a way I hadn't seen before. His jaw tightened. His eyes went flat. He said I was being controlling. That word hit me harder than anything else he'd said. I remember gripping the back of a chair so tightly my fingers hurt. My arms felt weak, like I might drop to the floor if I let go. I realized then how upside down everything had become. I was asking to see my own money, my own work, and somehow I was the problem. That afternoon, while he was out, I sat at the same kitchen table where I'd first started uncovering things. The sunlight was brighter this time, almost harsh. I logged into everything, slowly, carefully. I checked every connection, every payout, every message log. I wrote numbers down on a piece of paper because I couldn't trust my eyes to remember them. The total made my chest tighten. It wasn't just a little money. It was months of effort, late nights, fear, shame I'd carried alone. Seeing it all laid out like that made my hands go numb again. I had to stand up and walk to the sink because I thought I might throw up. I didn't cry, not then. I felt empty instead, hollow in a way that was almost peaceful. When he came back, I told him I was done, not angrily, just clearly. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, steady and distant. He tried to argue at first, then shifted tactics. He apologized. He said he'd fix it. He said he loved me. I listened, arms crossed, feeling how tired my body was, how heavy my eyelids felt. I told him to leave. Watching him pack was surreal. His movements were quick, almost careless, like he was already somewhere else. When the door finally closed behind him, the apartment felt unbearably quiet. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The days after were slow. My body reacted before my mind did. I slept in short bursts. I forgot to eat. My shoulders stayed tense, even when I tried to relax. Sometimes I'd catch myself holding my breath for no reason at all. I shut the account down. That part was harder than I expected. Not because I missed it, but because it felt like erasing proof of what I'd endured. My finger hovered over the screen longer than necessary before I confirmed it. When it was done, I set my phone down and just sat there, staring at the wall. Friends asked gentle questions. I gave vague answers. I wasn't ready to explain. I wasn't even sure how. I started going for long walks in the evenings just to feel movement again, to remind myself that my body still belonged to me. The city lights would flicker on as the sun went down, and I'd lean against a railing somewhere, breathing in the cool air, letting the noise ground me. It took time to understand what had really happened, that I hadn't been careless or weak, that trust, when it's used against you, stops being a virtue and starts becoming a weapon. I'd given someone access to my life because I believed in us. He'd used that belief to take more than money. The hardest part wasn't losing him. It was rebuilding my sense of reality, learning to listen to my discomfort again, learning that love doesn't require silence, that partnership doesn't mean surrendering control. Now, when I think back to that version of myself, I don't feel anger as much as I feel sadness. She was trying to survive. She was trying to build something stable in a world that kept shifting under her feet. I'm still rebuilding, slowly, with intention. Some nights, I still wake up tense, heart racing, reaching for a phone that no longer holds my secrets. But most days, I feel something I didn't feel back then. Ownership, not just of my money, but of my voice, my time, my body. And that has changed everything.